Hi. So today we're going to discuss some voting methods. These are going to be all the voting methods that would be on your exam. So you have dictatorship, something called plurality, a two-round runoff, instant runoff, agenda voting system, Borda, and Baldwin. So the summary of these voting methods can be found on Canvas under modules where you find your usual notes for the unit. So yeah, it's a very handy summary, and it would be very helpful to keep this, like have access to this when you are taking your exam, to have a quick look. Okay, so we'll go over each of these methods because all of these are covered in the first two homeworks of um, this unit, voting theory. So yeah, let's get started. Um, so in general, what you would be given is a voter profile. This could be individual voter profiles, like let's say you have voters V1, V2, and so on. And these voters have alternatives or candidates for choices, um, usually denoted by letters A, B, C, and so on. So this is usually in table form. So you'd have voter and their preference. So you could have individual voter preferences. Let's say you have just three voters and two alternatives A and B. And this is what their preference or voter profile looks like. So this just means that voter one prefers A over B, voter two prefers B over A, and voter three prefers B over A as well. More commonly, what you'd see is not individual voter preferences, but like a summary of their preferences. So instead of individual voter profiles, you'd be given the number of voters who have this preference. So maybe, let's say you have something like this, and you have three alternatives A, B, and C. Let's say you have something like this. Um, this table just means that you have three alternatives, A, B, and C, or three candidates, and you have a total of 14 plus 10 plus 2 plus 8 plus 9 voters. So whatever this turns out to be. And their preferences are uh, as follows. So 14 voters prefer A over B and B over C. 10 voters prefer B over A and A over C. 2 voters prefer C over A and A over B. 8 voters prefer A over C and C over B. And finally, 9 voters prefer B over C and C over A. This is what this means. We also like to order the votes, order the alternatives or candidates in a rank. The rank would depend on the system, the voting system that we use, but in general, we use this curvy greater than sign to show that maybe if we say A greater than B, that means that A is ranked higher than B according to that voting system. Sometimes individually also we do, let's say for this example here, uh, we use a little subscript to denote the voter. So over here, A greater than B with subscript 1 means that this is the ranking order for voter 1. So this little subscript 1 denotes that it's the ranking preference for the first voter. So since voter 1 prefers A over B in this example here, um, we write it as A greater than subscript 1B. Similarly, for voter 2, we have B greater than A for voter 2 and B greater than A for voter 3. Okay, so now let's go over some voting methods, starting with the simplest to the most complicated. So the simplest method is a dictatorship where just one voter determines the outcome of the entire election. So let's say in this example, you have voter 3 as the dictator, then the final outcome of the election would just be B greater than A. So whatever the dictator's preference is, that's the ranking. So social ranking is same as the dictator's preference. Okay. Then we have something called plurality. We'll, of course, go over examples for each of these methods, but for now, let's just talk about how it works, and then we'll see examples. Okay, so for plurality, you only look at the top preference. So the candidate or alternative with the most top preference votes comes in first. So the most second most top preference votes comes in second, and so on. So for this example here, the second table, um, if you compare A, B, and C under plurality, then A has, you only look at the top row. So you only look at the top preference. A has 14 plus 8 top votes. B has 10 plus 9 top votes. And C has only 2. So the social ranking according to this system would be A greater than B greater than C. Okay. So we only look at the top preferences in this voting system. And the voter that gets the most number of top votes comes in first. Who gets the second most number of top votes comes in second, and so on. Okay, so next one is two-round runoff. This is also a very common election or like voting system in many elections. So this happens in 2 rounds. So in round 1, you do a plurality vote and just look at the top 2 candidates. So um, in this example here, A and B were the top 2. Okay, and then so these move on to round 2. In the second round, you eliminate all other alternatives except for the top 2 alternatives. So C is eliminated. And then you redistribute the votes. We'll see examples for this one. So I also show what it means to redistribute votes. Basically, you just get rid of the alternative that you're eliminating. So kind of just ignore that that alternative ever lived in the table and re draw the table without the alternatives that you have eliminated. And then you compare the top two alternatives again after redistributing the votes. And that order, so the ranking would be the winner of round two is ranked first, the second place alternative from round two is ranked second, and all other alternatives tie for the last. So we're only looking at the top two alternatives and comparing those, and every other alternative ties at the last place. Then you have something called instant runoff, where you have plurality in rounds. So you would do round one and do a usual plurality vote, then eliminate the alternative that came in last. After that, you redistribute the votes among the remaining alternatives, and then you apply plurality again. Again, you eliminate the one alternative that had the last, that came in last, and continue with more rounds of plurality until you only have one alternative left. And this, the order in which they are eliminated would also determine the social ranking. Then there's something called agenda, where you can see something like this. You have a series of pairwise, or let's say, yeah, you have a series of pairwise competitions. So this is pairwise competitions are also called head-to-head or head-on competition. So it could look something like this, or if you have four alternatives, maybe something like this. Okay, so you draw brackets to denote different pairs of head-to-head matches, and you have these rounds. So this is the first round, this is the second and the final round. Again, this is the first round, this is the final round. Okay. And the social ranking again is given by just the final round. Everything else, everything before the final round doesn't matter. So um, let's say in this one here, the social ranking is gonna be D, which is the winner of the final round. So you have your final round here, which is B versus D, and D wins. So D is bigger than B, and these were the top two finalists. They are ranked higher than everything else, and the remaining alternatives are tied. So A and C are tied at the last place, just like two-round runoff. Similarly here, you have your final round between A and C, and A wins. So A is greater than C, and C is greater than B, which is the remaining alternative. So only top two alternatives matter, and they are bigger than everything else. Again, we'll see how this goes with more examples. Now, the border voting system. Over here, you give points to different preferences. So the lowest preference is given 0 points. The next lowest preference is given 1 point. And the next lowest is given 2 points, and so on. So you kind of weigh the preferences. The top preference is the most important. The second top preference for every candidate is the second most important, and so on. So the last preference is the least important. So much that it doesn't even matter. It gets 0 points. And then using these weights for preferences, you assign points to each of the alternative, and then you compare the alternatives based on the total points that they get. Again, we'll do this with the help of an example and understand with the help of an example. But for this one, I'll just take this example again to show how Boda system works. So let me put it somewhere here. So for Boda, you would assign points to each of the preference. So 0 points to the least preference, 1 point to the second last preference, and 2 points here for the top preference. If you had four alternatives, then this would be like 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay. Now, to find the points, you for A, let's say, you look at look at each row. So look at row 1, which corresponds to 2 points. That is the top preference. And then you look at the number of votes for A. Okay, so you have 14 plus 8 votes for A with the top preference. So 14 plus 8 times 2. Okay, then you look at the second row, which is the second preference for the voters, and it has 1 point. Now you again count the number of people who voted A as the second preference. So you have 10 plus 2 voters who have A as their second preference, and the second preference weighs for 1 point. So this would be 10 plus 2 times 1. Finally, you don't technically have to do this because it's 0 points, but just for the sake of completion, you have the last row and you look at A, and 9 people, sorry, 9 people have their last preference as A, but that has just 0 weight, so it doesn't really count. Okay, so you have a total of these many points. Similarly, you do the same thing for C and D, and then compare A, B, and C, and the ranks would be according to the points that they get. Finally, Baldwin is just Boda in rounds. So you do round 1 of a Boda voting system, and then eliminate the last preference or the alternative with the least number of points. And then you repeat your Boda system with the remaining alternatives after eliminating the the alternative that came in last in round 1. And then you apply Boda again and keep doing this until you are left with just one alternative. Okay. In the next video, I'll show you how this works in homework 1.